This is Atalanta, the fleet-footed Huntress. Part 2, The Wild Boar of Calydon. Not very far from the land of Arcadia, there was a little city named Calydon. It lay in the midst of rich wheat fields and fruitful vineyards, but beyond the vineyards was a deep, dense forest where many wild beasts lived. One day, the largest and fiercest wild boar that anybody had ever seen came rushing out of the forest. It had 2 long tusks, which struck far out of its mouth on either side, and were as sharp as knives, and the stiff bristles on its back were as long as knitting needles. The wild boar raced towards Calydon, champing its teeth and foaming at the mouth. It rushed into the wheat fields and tore up all the grain. It charged into the vineyard and broke down all the vines. It rooted up all the trees in the orchards. And when there was nothing else to do, it hurtled into the pastures among the hills and killed the sheep that were feeding there. The beasts were so fierce and so swift that everyone fled before it. Its thick skin was proof against arrows and against such spears as the people of Calydon had, and many brave warriors who tried to attack the boar died at the edge of its terrible razor tusks. For weeks it ran wild about the countryside, and the only safe place for anybody was inside the city walls. At last, when it had laid waste to much of the country, the boar went back into the edge of the forest. But the people were so much afraid of it that they lived in constant dread that the beast should come again and tear down the gates of the city. So the king of Calydon sent messengers into all the countries nearby, asking the brave men and the most skillful hunters to come at a certain time and help him hunt and kill the great wild boar. When the day came, there was a wonderful gathering of men at Calydon. The greatest heroes in the world were there. Everyone was fully armed and all expected to have fine sport hunting the terrible beast. With the warriors from the south came Atalanta, armed with a bow and arrows and a long hunting spear. "My daughters are having a game of ball in the garden," said the king to the huntress. "Would you like to put away your arrows and your spear and go play with them?" Atalanta shook her head and lifted her chin in disdain. "Perhaps you would rather stay with the queen and look at the women spin and weave," said the king. "No," answered Atalanta. "I am going with the warriors to hunt the wild boar in the forest." The men gasped. They had never heard of such a thing as a girl going out with heroes to hunt wild boars. "If she goes, then I will not," muttered one. "Nor will I," said another, a little more loudly. "Why, the whole world would laugh at us, and we should never hear the end of it." "Nor will I," exclaimed a third. "The hunt is for heroes, not for girls." Many of the men guffawed and hooted at the young huntress. But Atalanta only grasped her spear more firmly and stood tall and straight in the gateway of the palace. Just then the young prince of Calydon came forward. His name was Meleager. "What's this?" he cried. "Who says that Atalanta shall not go to the hunt? Why, I believe you are afraid that she'll be braver than you. Fine heroes are. Let all such cowards go home at once." All laughter died away in a moment, and not a single man moved, and it was settled then that Atalanta would go with the heroes to hunt the wild boar, though some of the men kept muttering and complaining among themselves. For 9 days the heroes and huntsmen feasted in the halls of the king of Calydon. Early on the 10th they set out for the forest. Soon they came upon the great beast, which came charging out upon his foes. The heroes hid behind the trees or climbed up among the branches, for they had not expected to see so terrible a creature. The boar stood in the middle of the glade, pawing the ground with his hooves and tearing it up with his tusks. White foam rolled from his mouth, his eyes glistened like red fire, and he grunted so fiercely that the woods and the hills echoed with fearful sounds. One of the bravest of the men threw his spear, but that only made the beast fiercer than ever. He charged the warrior, caught him before he could scramble into a tree, and tore him to pieces in a mad fury. Another man leapt out from his hiding place and was also killed. Then one of the oldest and noblest of the heroes launched his spear with a mighty heave, but it only grazed the boar's tough skin and glanced away. The boar was getting the best in the fight. Softly, Atalanta stepped out into the glade. She leveled her spear and threw it with all her might. The boar squealed as the sharp point pierced its skin. It ran about in a frenzy, heedless of the hunters and the arrows and the spears. Then Meleager rushed up and thrust his spear into his heart. The terrible creature thrashed and then rolled over, dead. The heroes then cut off the boar's skin and offered it to Meleager as a prize, because he had given the boar its death wound. But Meleager said, "It belongs to Atalanta, because it was she who wounded the boar first," and he gave the skin to her as a prize of honor.